I am Dustin Baker. We are here on the March 20th edition. By the time you guys and gals are watching, probably March 21st. I am here with Alex, who is our very own Skol Doc. How are you, sir?
Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Not bad. Hey, can you give us a little biography of yourself if folks are seeing you for the first time?
Absolutely. So yeah, my name's Alex. I'm from the northwestern part of Illinois.
Okay.
Grew up near Rockford, Illinois. So you can see the house divided behind me. Married into a Bears family. So I've been in Bears country my entire life. 33 years old. So my foot got in the door as a Vikings fan with Randy Moss, like a lot of out-of-state fans, and really picked up my fandom when Adrian Peterson was drafted. Just went all in, and then of course the '09 season was kind of my first heartbreak, I would say. And then, I've been in the door ever since. And I tend to overcompensate probably living in Bears country. And I tend to be pretty vocal on Twitter at times. So, love it or hate it, I was kind of on the other side of the Kirk fence than a lot of people. I'm excited that we're finally drafting a rookie here and just getting some excitement, into the fan base, something new. So
Yeah.
that's me. I'm a foot and ankle surgeon in Chicago. So a lot of people will reach out to me on Twitter with questions about injuries and whatnot. And I like to kind of educate people on the science behind sports injuries and whatnot. So that's a little bit about myself.
All right. Well, we're gonna transplant that from Twitter to YouTube tonight because we're gonna ask you about a couple of these injuries, mainly Hawkinson towards the end of the show. I think Yannick might have one about Kirk as well. Welcome to the show. On this, you'll have a panel of two guys who are considered Kirk guys, but also dudes who are really excited to try something new because it's time. I think Yannick and I collectively agreed. Separately, though, probably after they lost to the Giants in the playoffs, it was time to start thinking about the future because age suddenly entered the chat. I think that was the selling factor for Yannick and I. Speaking of Yannick, he's up late in Europe. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good.
Right on. We're counting down the days. We are 5 weeks until the draft, and that will be a grand Vikings climax. All right, Yannick, why don't you start it off with Alex? What question you got for him tonight?
So I know he's no longer our problem, if you want to call him that. But if we have you on, I gotta ask about Kirk's Achilles. What do you think his time frame is? When do you think he'll be back? And with that, do you think he's no longer the indestructible Kirk we've known for years? And did that change Kwesi's approach?
Great question. So first of all, I said I was on the other side of the Kirk fence. I still want it to be known that I'm not a Kirk hater by any means. I love the guy. Great human, great quarterback, great person. So gonna miss him. He was a great Vikings quarterback, one of the best that we've had. And in answering your question, in terms of the Achilles injury, I don't think that changed Kwesi's approach at all. In terms of the re-rupture rate, it's about 3 to 5% in professional athletes, probably lower in quarterbacks who play the game like Kirk. Honestly, I would not be worried about that. His time frame, he's been coming along great. I think that he's going to be ready to participate in OTAs, probably not fully cleared until training camp, maybe early training camp to actually get behind some live action there. My only true concern with Kirk and his injury was if he gets off platform, is he going to have the arm strength to really do what he needs to do to throw the ball? Because Kirk's always been, a full body thrower. He really generates ground reactive force through his base. He doesn't have a Josh Allen arm, you know what I mean? So he relies on a lot of technique, a lot of core strength, and that all comes from the ground up. So there may be times this season when we watch Kirk and we think to ourselves, oh, that ball didn't have the velocity that we're used to seeing. And that usually comes back with time. So that was really my only concern. But again, Atlanta blew, the offer right out of the roof there. I don't think the Vikings could have matched that. And I don't think that's Achilles related. I think that's more so just like age related. Kwesi hasn't been shy about saying that we can't really project 2-3 years out. And I think the offers that we've heard about in terms of guaranteed money kind of reflected that. And Atlanta was just ready to go there because that's where their roster is versus where our roster is. So I agree with both sides. It made sense. It's kind of a win-win for Kirk and for the Vikings, in my opinion. But in terms of his injury, I wouldn't be concerned. I think he's going to have a very good year this year.
Alex, I'm older than the both of you as I'm 40. And I'm convinced that when I was young, when a player or athlete at all had an Achilles injury, it was like a ooh type of deal. But now it kind of feels like, oh, that sucks. He'll be back in 9 to 12 months. Do you know specifically what changed in 30 years to make that less brutal on athletes?
It's a great question. I think that the right tackle we had, Phil Lodeholt, he kind of scarred us a little bit because he retore it, right? I believe he retore it. So, and that's tough. He was a giant man, like a Bryant McKinney type of a tackle, and that's a lot of stress to put on that Achilles tendon. And then we have Cam Akers. I believe he retore his. And honestly, that's just bad luck. Like I said, the re-rupture weight's actually really low. So I think that there's been a couple examples in our mind that make it seem worse than what it actually is in terms of the science behind it and the re-rupture rate. So to answer your question, I don't think that science is necessarily, or that surgical technique has become more advanced, to let these athletes get back quicker or decrease their rate of re-rupture or anything like that. I think it's just that us Viking fans have a couple examples in our mind that make it seem like, like that.
Yeah, that would make sense, especially going back to my youth, whether it was basketball or football. Maybe I just got devastated easier when I heard my favorite player or whatever was going to be out that long. So that completely checks out. All right, the rest of the show after this question is going to be quarterback focused and Hawkinson at the end. But I want to ask you this kind of random one per the subject matter tonight. The Vikings have right now about 2 or 3 dudes that could earn the WR3 job on the roster right now. The newcomer, Trent Sherfield, Brandon Powell, everybody's favorite, and then Jalen Naylor, if he could be healthy. I want you to predict, who do you think when we roll around to week 1? Will it be one of those men, a different veteran, or a rookie from the draft at WR3?
I'm going to cop out of this one a little bit and say that I think that they use an approach, like a committee approach to it, to be honest. But if I'm picking one person to kind of lead that group, it's probably Brandon Powell. I think he had a lot of success on third downs, especially when Justin Jefferson went down. He really stepped up, became a big part of the offense when you needed him. He had a little bit of clutch to his game. But I think Jalen Naylor also has an opportunity, and he's just got to stay healthy. But I love his speed. The Vikings love to run dagger concepts where you have a fast guy run straight down the field, clear out that middle for Justin Jefferson to come across the middle. So that's a big component too. I still think there's a chance as well that they look into the free agent market as we get a little bit closer to the draft and remove, maybe even after the draft, to be honest with you. There's still a lot of guys out there, a lot of young guys too that could fit this team. So just looking at a list here, Hunter Renfrow, and he's kind of strange because he went from having 100 catches in a year to like being cut by the Raiders. So I want to know what's going on there, but a great slot option, gets open versus man coverage. You got Tyler Boyd, who's been Mr. Reliable out of the slot for the Bengals for a long time. He's 29 years old. DJ Chark would give you, as a 27-year-old, a big body, something that we don't really have on this roster. So that gives you something else. And he's fast too. Paris Campbell's 26 years old. Mecole Hardman is a good name at 26, another really fast guy, 4.33 speed, again with the dagger concepts, and you can just run drag routes. He'll run away from people. Josh Reynolds is a name that I think makes a lot of sense at 29 years old. Had a great year for the Lions, had a really rough NFC Championship game though. He has ties to KOC through the Rams when they worked together, so that just makes sense to me. He could come in and be wide receiver 3 day 1 and take a majority of those snaps. And then one last name I wrote down here is Isaiah Hodgins, who pretty sure he torched Patrick Peterson in that playoff game here in Minnesota. And he's only 25 years old, so that's another name. But I'm kind of out on some of these older guys like Michael Thomas or Odell Beckham Jr. Not really a big fan of that. But I'll tell you one guy that I would love in the draft, if they were able to get him later on, is Luke McCaffrey, the younger brother of Christian McCaffrey. He's got a relative athletic score of 9.56%. So that's 95th percentile athlete. 6'2", 200 pounds, can play inside or outside. 4.46 speed, 95th percentile 10-yard sprint, 94th percentile 3-cone, and he's projected as a day 3 pick. So he's got the bloodlines. That's a guy I would be excited about if they could get him in. He's got a real shot to compete for wide receiver 3 from day 1.
Yeah, when you list them all off like that, and then we have the McCaffrey speech, we really shouldn't have too much angst, because there are a lot of options now that you've listed them off, that if they realize, even in the summer, if they realize, yeah, well, we screwed this up, we're going to need somebody else. It seems like, I don't think all 12 of those guys, whatever it is, are going to be completely off the board. So thankfully, they'll have options. All right, so WR3 is in the books, probably Powell, but there's a lot of stuff if they're interested, and the draft is stuffed to the gills with WR3 tights, especially in the mid rounds. Yannick, what's your next thing for Alex?
I want to look ahead at the draft. We all expect the Vikings to trade up for a quarterback, I guess. For this scenario, I just want to say Caleb and Jaden Daniels are probably off the board, and it's going to be third or fourth pick. Who would you prefer of the two guys that have been sent to the Vikings in mock drafts in the recent days? Drake May, JJ McCarthy. Who's your guy?
Yeah, it's a really funny question, because if you asked me this a month ago, I'd almost laugh and just say it's not even close, right? It's Drake May all day with a bullet. I've really come much closer to the JJ McCarthy side, because Thor Nystrom, you guys talked to Thor Nystrom, but that guy loves him some JJ McCarthy. And so I dug in deeper and I started watching some of the things that he's talking about, and I can see it. Some of the things that JJ does, the way that he's so good against pressure, he keeps his eyes downfield. He's got excellent mobility. He throws a rocket. He throws into tight windows. He throws excellent over the middle. So the only reason I was a little down on him is because the draft consensus was low on him coming into draft season. And so that kind of put the bad taste in our mouth right off the bat, where you feel like you're settling on someone. And we all have Christian Ponder PTSD as Vikings fans. So we don't want, that second round prospect taken at 11 or 12, like we did last time. So that was the concern. But then you start hearing the NFL, that they're higher on JJ McCarthy than the draft consensus was. And we hear that a lot sometimes, with the whole Will Levis situation and who's that Liberty kid? Malik Willis.
Blake Willis, yeah.
Yeah, like sometimes the draft community is just so far off and you never know what to believe. What I believe the McCarthy stuff, because you have high profile guys like Lance Zierlein or his name's escaping me, but Daniel Jeremiah, right? They're talking about talking to league office members, and they're explaining why JJ McCarthy's so high. So I do buy that he's a top 10 pick. I absolutely do. So the question, Yannick, that getting down to the nitty gritty of what you're asking is, who do I still prefer? I still prefer Drake May over JJ McCarthy. But now the question becomes, at what price? Because if you're getting Drake May, what likely you have to do is trade up to 3, and you're going to have to give up at least your first round pick next year to get up there. So do you like Drake May for that price, or do you like JJ McCarthy for trading up to potentially 4 or 5 and keeping your first rounder next year? And let's be honest, I mean, the Vikings may have a top 10 pick next year, right? That just goes in the territory of playing a rookie quarterback, still having a lot of holes to fill on this roster. Exactly. Sam Darnold. Yeah. So it's very likely we have a top 10 pick last year. That's going to be a hell of a salty taste in our mouth next year. I mean, think about how the Panther fans feel this year. They're going to watch the Bears take Caleb Williams with their first overall pick. I mean, that's got to feel terrible. So if it's me though, I would take Drake May. I would give that first round pick. I'd go up to number 3 and I'd take Drake May, just because I feel like there's a little bit less risk factor to his game. A little bit better how that's going to translate versus JJ McCarthy, which I think there's still some questions there. But at the end of the day, if we're taking one of those two quarterbacks, I'm happy as a Vikings fan. Let's rock and roll.
Yeah, and it feels, I've said this a couple times on the show. On Saturday, Brevin Bain was on. We were talking to Optimistic Vikings fan, and Brevin made an excellent point that it's weird that J.J. McCarthy feels like the floor. And after that trade on Friday, that feels like a worst-case scenario, and that's a cool thing to have when you're going into a draft where you need a QB1. The other thing about the price tag you mentioned, if they have to trade with the Cardinals or with the Chargers, if they feel secure enough to do that, if they end up only giving up these 2 first rounders and maybe something else for deal sweetener, it's going to feel like he's almost free based on the way that we've talked ourselves into thinking about Drake May for 3 firsts and stuff like that. If they get to keep their first rounder next year by drafting McCarthy, which was, the scintillating point that you had, I swear to God, on Friday morning, we're going to be like, oh my God, how did we do this? Because we feel like we own those 2 first round picks now. Whereas if it is trading up 3 firsts and whatever it is for McCarthy or Daniels, it's going to hurt. There's no other way around it, especially when we get to draft time in the next year or whatever. And the other thing about McCarthy that's really I want to point out, because you talked about how you've arrived at the party like I have in the past 6 weeks, trying to figure out why does everybody like this guy? Then you dig into it, you see it. There's no more football games that have been played since then. It's just that we all got educated and watched the tape. And on the contrast or lack thereof to Will Levis or Malik Willis, it seems like this thing about McCarthy is more team or general manager driven than it is hot take artists that are in the draft community. That's what I'm resting on my laurels, because I'm thinking it's probably going to be McCarthy based on Vegas odds and the price tag. I hope that it's more driven by team dialogue and say, listen to what some of these general managers are saying. This isn't like Malik Willis, folks.
Let me ask you guys real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I saw that Chad Graff, old Minnesota Vikings beat member, went back out to cover his team growing up. He was a Pats fan. He's saying that he thinks there's about a 30% chance that the Patriots would be willing to trade that pick. I've always contended that if they were smart, they should trade that pick, because I think they're going to ruin the poor kid, whoever they draft, with as many holes as they have. What do you guys think? What's the percentage chance that you think the Pats would be willing to accept a trade from the Vikings?
It really depends on what the Patriots want to do. Do they want to draft the quarterback now and fill the holes later? Or do they want to fill the holes now and draft the quarterback later? It really depends on how they think they can build a roster. If they like Drake May, they're going to draft him, because you can't pass a quarterback you like. If they don't like him, they're going to trade. I think it's that easy.
I'll put it at between 40 and 45% that they actually do it. And my 10% variance from Chad Graff might be because I really want it to happen. But I wrote about this back when Drake May felt like a complete prayer. When you looked at the Patriots depth chart, it looked exactly what we think it is. A team that was grown by Bill Belichick and then conveniently had Tom Brady to go win the Super Bowls. And then, we used to wonder, like, how the hell did they do this? Look at this roster. They get these wide receivers are idiots. But it didn't matter when you had Brady and Belichick. And so you take over, or a new regime takes over, you look down at it, you're like, shit, what is this garbage? And so when I was looking at their depth chart before free agency, they needed a quarterback. They needed at least 2 wide receivers. They needed an edge rusher after Matthew Udon, and then 2 offensive tackles. Now, I think they checked one of those boxes, and then their version of like completing the wide receiver to-do list, I guess, is done, but it's still pretty shitty compared to the rest of the NFL. So I would think it's too irresistible not to take the Vikings 3 first-round picks and build, because they should know in their heart of hearts, if they drop Drake May into it, he's going to be the one that goes 4-13, and you're just going to have to swallow that because your team isn't very good. So there's also that argument from Elliot Wolf coming from the Packers school of thought, like you want to have a good skeleton, before you try to walk. So I think there's a better chance than Graff said. But at the end of the debate, it's like, if they are absolutely enamored with Drake May, then you got to go ahead and take him. All right, let me get you, before we go into, let's see, I think Yannick's going to ask one more thing, but while we're on this subject, what about your prediction? Like, we heard about what you kind of want with, like, you're in agreement with both of us, by the way. It's Drake May or bust, but if we bust, immediately we'll take McCarthy. What do you predict the Vikings will draft?
It feels like they're moving up, and if I had to place the most probabilistic answers, I think they move up to 5 to take JJ McCarthy. I think the Cardinals probably stay and take Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, and then the Vikings go to 5. I'd place it at probably 60%, and then 40% they trade up to 3, like you were saying, and they get the Patriots to bite. And then one more thing is, the only scenario that would really grind my gears I wouldn't love is Bo Nix. Even if we ended up with Michael Penix, I'm fine with that. He's got a piss missile of an arm. I think he could make it work. He didn't throw over the middle. That's the only thing that I'm like, can you really do it? But it might have just been his offense at Washington. But he ran a tough offense at Washington. He commanded it well. I think he's got a little bit more mobility than people give him credit for. So if we got Michael Penix, I wouldn't personally feel like, oh my God, we really settled. I would still feel like, okay, well, we got Michael Penix. Let's see what we do with this other first round pick. Can we get a penetrating defensive tackle maybe, or a cornerback 1? and be excited about using some more of that ammo. But yeah, I just want to throw that out there. Bo Nix, and I'm going to be sad guy.
I'm going to have to ask our producer, Tyler Ireland. I think you're the 5th or 6th guest that's come on right in this little slot right here and says anything but Bo Nix. And it's like down the line. I think there was one person who said, I don't hate Bo Nix. And I don't even remember who that was. But yeah, down the line, it's give me one of these guys but Bo Nix. So we have agreement. All right, Yannick, what's your final thing for Alex? And then I'll ask him about Hawkinson, and we'll skedaddle.
So since you're living in Bears country and Bears household, at least partly, are Bears fans excited about Caleb Williams? Do they or do they still feel sad before Justin Fields and how that whole situation shook out?
It's interesting. It depends on who you talk to. They very much had a dichotomy in Chicago with, I'd say, roughly 50% of them being field stands, very much like we have, Kirk stands. No disrespect to that term, by the way. I don't mean, you know what I mean? Like they defend Justin Fields to the very end, and they're going through the 7 stages of grief right now that he left. But I think they're all coming around, especially after the pro day today, where Caleb was just throwing that ball all over the field and dabbing up Ryan Poles and whatnot. I think they're all getting pretty excited, and I think the Keenan Allen trade really fired up the fan base. They're excited about the weapons now that they have for that rookie quarterback that's coming in. So they're pretty excited despite of losing Justin Fields. I think as the draft's getting closer, they're getting more and more excited. There was definitely a gut punch feeling, though, in the city of Chicago when Fields was traded for the draft compensation that he was. I think they realized, number one, that nobody is high on him like they were, and that they were wrong about Justin Fields the entire time.
Yeah, I still blame Mel Kiper a little bit. On like January 9th, he said on somebody's airwaves that, hey, I'd trade him to the Falcons for the 8th pick. And everybody's like, what? That can happen? So I think it's half Bears fans' fault, half Mel Kiper. All right, the final thing is extraordinarily applicable to Vikings football. TJ Hawkinson was hit by Kirby Joseph in week, was it 16? And then Joseph did the same thing to Tyler Higbee a week or 2 later. I want to know your prognosis, Skol Doc, on TJ Hawkinson. Should we expect him sometime early in 2024? Is this going to be a November type of thing?
Yeah, disclaimer, I'm foot and ankle, so it's a little out of my jurisdiction,
Okay.
but I have, in medical school, we've studied that. I just haven't read up on it lately. But ACL reconstruction has come a long way in the last 20 years. I mean, look back to Adrian Peterson, the way that he came back, almost broke the rushing record. Was he 8 yards short? Just unbelievable what these guys can do. He was a little delayed from swelling and getting his surgery performed, so that's gonna cut into his recovery time a little bit, just because it added about a month of recovery there because he couldn't get under the knife soon enough. If I had to guess, he's probably a candidate to start the year on the PUP and miss the first 6 games of the season. That's what I'm thinking. Okay. But I fully expect that once he comes back, he's going to be, the same old Hawk. It's really unfortunate. It sucks that the same thing happened like 2 weeks apart from the same defender. But at the same time, it's been my stance the whole time. What do we want these guys to do? You know what I mean? Like, they got to go low. There's probably a better way to do it. His head coach says, keep your eyes up, see what you're hitting. Both pictures, he's looking straight at the ground. So, he's not practicing what they're preaching. But these guys are getting fined an insane amount of money because they're hitting guys in the head. So it's what the NFL's kind of pushing out there, and not sure what these guys can do about it. And unfortunately, we saw the result of it in TJ Hawkinson, who to this day, there's some Vikings fans who question that move because of basically how good the Lions rookie Sam Laporta has turned out to be in despite of TJ Hawkinson. But let's not be blind to what TJ accomplished. I mean, he was a top 3 tight end this year in the NFL, and he's going to be a great weapon for whatever rookie quarterback the Vikings draft this year.
Well, I knew he was going to be good. I think within a half hour of that Washington game when he debuted, I recall texting Yannick in the weeks after his arrival, like, what do we do without this guy? Like, I didn't even remember how the offense would function without him getting like 9 targets in the middle of the field. during his first season, the 13-4 season. So if he is indeed, if you are correct, and he has hits the pup and he's out 6 games, the Vikings will pivot to Yannick's guy, Johnny Munt. Josh Oliver is still under contract, and then Nick Muse is back in the saddle. And I'm going to guess before training camp, they'll either have a late round rookie or probably some other practice squad guy, kind of like they had Ben Sims last year, who ended up with the Packers. All right, Yannick, you got anything else for Alex before we sign off?
No, I think that's it.
No, Alex, any closing arguments for the group?
Not at all. Just wanted to thank you guys for having me. It's a lot of fun. Always love to get together and talk Vikings.
Hell yeah. You were talking earlier about Phil Lodeholt, and then you talked about Brian McKinney. If you'd like, next Wednesday or a Wednesday after that, you can come on my Belief show and meet Brian McKinney over a video call like this if you want to.
Hell yeah. That sounds great.
All right, we'll process that offline, and then for the rest of you, we'll be back, let's see, probably on Friday to go through whatever news we might have about the Vikings. All right, gentlemen?
Sounds good.
All right, take it easy.